Test 1 2 test 1 2. Sorry. Okay, so I'm sorry for the bit of a late start today. We I'm in my ear still. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Um, so my neighbor's dog keeps breaking out of the fence, and they keep putting him in our fence because, well, he doesn't get along with their dogs. We're trying, keyword trying, to get him to a free clinic to get him neutered. But it's gonna take a bit of work, and, well, we're working on it at the very least. So yeah, I had to help them try and get him back in the fence again. So today we'll be working on Class Tanker Volume 7. This story follows Nylia and her companions. Currently, so far as they are currently doing a slight coming of age sort of thing. In previous chapters, we've seen them unlock their abilities. Then we have about a year time skip to them hunting a nest of goblins as a job for the village in order to increase their level and train them. But it didn't turn out the best. Side. Sighed as they finally made it back. I don't know why I couldn't think of how to spell that. To the main road. Road. Well, road might be a bit of an exaggeration. A cleared and worn path barely wide enough for a wagon to fit through without getting caught on a nearby tree. With an arm's length on each side. They really wished they could have brought a wagon along. But the nest was too far from the road for them to bring any form of beast of burden and expect to come back and find it still sitting there, instead of in the belly of some random beast. Since they had to scout the area to find the goblins, the previous day they had set up their camp and decided to rest for the night. And since they had managed to get an earlier start in the morning, thanks to Nylia's nightmare, they had cleared the nest, or more likely just sealed one of its openings. Coughing. But regardless, they had finished up earlier than they were expecting. With a little luck, they should be able to make it back to the village just before nightfall. And if they couldn't manage that, had a few both lanterns and flashlights. Enough lanterns for everyone. So if they were close enough, they could finish they shouldn't have much issue reaching the village if they don't manage to make it before the sun sets. But they'd still have to walk the entire way. This was easier for her two companions. Both had shorter legs. And had to deal with the added drag of her tail. Well, she could lift it off the ground. But the muscles in her tail would eventually get tired. Not to mention, if it dragged all day long, it would inevitably wear the scales down. It would inevitably wear the scales down. Never seen it do that before. Oh well. This would be a bigger issue without her healing capabilities, as Dragonkin weren't typically migratory. Very active people. When they weren't hunting in their natural habitats, they tend to find a comfy spot and rest to reserve energy. Outside of their natural territory, they were a bit more active, yes. But they tended to more be shopkeepers or work in inns or other dwellings where they could keep the temperature comfy and warm. for those of you joining us, I'm working on my story, class Tanker. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm just reading through my notes at the moment. Give me a sec and I'll get back to it. Probably should have brought my mic back to my mouth. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm working my story, class Tanker. Sorry I'm being quiet for the moment. I'm just rereading my notes. If you have any questions about the story or anything, pop them in the chat and I'm happy to answer. There were a handful of odd inventions that people had come up with over the years to help with that, but they were always super uncomfortable. So every now and again they'd have to stop to let her healing factor repair the damage. Took the opportunities to take a short rest as well, though they could easily keep going. All in all, the hike back to town was pretty uneventful. That was until they started to get closer to the village. The sun had already began to set, and Nyla was about to pass out. Rusty. was about to pass out the lanterns so I could keep going. When Marianne stopped her, pulling both of them off the road and into the forest. And out of sight just before a pack of goblins stumbled out into the road. Stumbled out onto the road on the opposite side. Sorry. Which was a very, very bad sign. Goblins usually avoided settlements, well, at least this far out of the safe zone. Their tiny village was built more like a fortress. Big walls, ringed defenses. A ballista guarding each gate. A ballista guarding each gate. Most would think it was overkill if it wasn't unheard of that occasionally a hungry troll didn't come stumbling out of the forest. Or some other beast. Rusty, please. Rusty, wake up. Wake up, Rusty. Rusty. Sorry about that. She keeps wanting to sleep in these odd positions, and she keeps snoring for it. I love that dog, but she can make a heck of a noise. Looking to make a meal out to the villagers. Out of the villagers. There was a reason why these nearby forests weren't considered safe. Outside the relative safe zones of the claimed territories of the various races, goblins were more considered scavengers than hunters. If they were here, then something was up with the village. They were probably a good 10, 15 minutes walk from the clearing just to reach the village. Sorry. Spider just caught my attention there for a minute. For those of you joining, I'm working on my story, Class Tanker. We're currently working on Chapter 6. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or anything you want to know, or if you want a link to the story itself, or, well, whatever. Anyways, back to work. Clearing that surrounded the village. There was a clear 30 yards between the forest line and the village walls, simply to keep open lines of fire for any archers. They didn't or for the gate's ballista. They spent another nearly another hour working their way around and back to the clearing. And they really didn't like what they found. Dozens of trolls was hounding. Were trying to bash their way through the gate. The eastern gate. That would be bad enough if these trolls didn't have freaking armor, of all things, on. Who the heck would be dumb enough to forge armor for monsters? Yes, in theory they could be used for militaries, and a few commanders had even managed to tame a few and add them to their ranks as massive walking bulwarks or berserkers. But they weren't. Reliable. They weren't loyal. For a dozen well-armed and armored trolls to be here made no sense. Neither did the armed and armored packs of dozens of goblins. That were packs of goblins running all over the field. There had to be close to 200 of those things running around. With more coming out of the forest. To the northeast. Thankfully, they had been working their way southward and was halfway to the southern gate. But they didn't want to risk being caught, so they continued to sneak their way until they reached the eastern gate. Well, not nearly as many guards stood there. More than a few were on For those of you joining, I'm currently working on my story, A Class Tanker. If you want to know anything about it, please feel free to leave a comment. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Western Gate. There were fewer guards here than at the north. Here than there was at the eastern gate where the fighting was, but they were still enough to keep watch in case they decided to attack from another direction. Quickly pulled out a signal. Summoned a signal lantern. And then a quickly flashed the village. They moved about 10 feet to the right, and then did it again, before moving 20 feet to the left and repeating. It wasn't until the 5th time they tried this that they finally get spotted and got a response. Every villager was required to study the list of shorthand codes that could be flashed using signal lanterns for emergencies just like this. The guard confirmed that they'd be willing to open the gate, enough for them to squeeze under, but they wouldn't open it until they were at the village walls. And as the guard currently didn't see any enemies nearby, the three decided to make a run for it. They made it over halfway there before a random goblin spotted them. Since they had been hiking back earlier, none of them were in their armor. Beyond, for those joining us, I'm working on my story at Class Tanker. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to know or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Beyond a few odd pieces, just in case they got ambushed. Nothing that would hinder their mobility or be particularly heavy. And if you're hearing snoring in the background, it's my dog, Rusty. 90-pound pit bull. Massive lump of love and squish. Rusty! 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 Shield and service pistol appeared in her hands. She managed to block a few arrows, and with a faint sound, the silenced weapon managed to kill 3 of the 5. Goblins. Marianne managing to take down another with her bow, and the guard taking the last down before they reached the gate. Nyla planted her shield as the gate slowly began to rise. Despite their best efforts to be quiet, more goblins had noticed the dead bodies of their companion and were heading their way. A single mana point vanished into the ether as activated her reload skill, followed by another as the clip vanished from the gun, only to be replaced with another. She had 5 clips of ammo, and she was rapidly burning through them. The gun was nowhere near as powerful as her shotgun, and firing it one-handed, while not hard, was far less accurate, as the weapon was smaller and harder to aim. For those of you joining, I'm currently working on my story, A Class Tanker. If you have any questions or want to make any suggestions, please leave them in the comment section. Shoot. Thought I had that turned off. She burnt through 3 clips before dropping to the ground and rolling under the door. With a deep groan, it slammed back to the ground behind her. The rune above the gate flashing back on. If the walls had been made of simple wood and plaster, as they looked, they wouldn't be much point, as something as strong as a troll could simply yank it down. No, the walls were reinforced with magic, runes and spell work, intertwined. With the physical properties of the walls themselves. Unfortunately, their protection wasn't endless. The spellwork itself had a limited amount of mana it could hold, and while they could be linked to a mana source, either a ley line, a magical artifact, a spell battery, or even just a really big mana crystal, they would only extend the limited lifespan of the spellwork. The spell's limited lifespan. The spell's limited lifespan. They did not have the money nor the magic to outlast a siege. Instead, it was merely meant to protect them to buy time long enough for the various defenders and inhabitants to ward off whatever was attacking them. Hey, to those who recently joined us, I'm working on my story, A-Class Tanker. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. And normally that would work, but they simply didn't have the firepower to wipe out dozens of trolls at once. Trolls were particularly hard to kill because, like their orc and ogre cousins, they had powerful healing abilities. To the point, if you did not destroy both the heart and the brain, given enough time, they could heal from just about anything. In all honesty, enough abuse could kill them by overtaxing their healing factor, and they'd die like the rest of them. But this would take an excessive amount of time, effort, and just be downright cruel. Fire was effective, but any commander worth their salt would have that armor enchanted to resist fire. Sorry, I was rereading my notes. For those of you who are joining us, I'm working on my story, A Class Tanker. If you have any questions or want to add anything or make suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. Though, with the occasional explosion, she guessed they had found some way around that. Fire, though with a resounding boom, she guessed someone had found a way around that. Christopher She and Christopher Marianne the three of them quickly made their way to the village center, where a makeshift medic tent and command center had been set up. What was his name? Gage, that was his name. Gage met the three of them as they came to a panting stop. For those of you, I'm going to fix that. For those of you joining us, this is my story, A Class Tanker. I'm currently working on it. If you have any questions or anything you like to suggest or anything, please leave it in the comments. as they ran over. Approached. The town center. There you three are. I'm glad. I'm glad you made it back safely. But you might have been safer out there in the woods. The wards are about to run out of power. We've been doing our best on the walls. Nyla, your mother, has had the best effect against them as she's able to get past the gaps in their armor. And she's managed to take at least one of those bastards out, but it's slow going. She has to take it easy with your... as we don't want to risk her losing the baby. Nyla's parents have been trying for years. Pretty much as soon as they had her, they had been trying for another baby. They had came close a few times, only for her mother to have a miscarriage. As both of them were hybrids themselves. They had a but it looked like this one might actually come to term. As she was supposed to give birth in a few weeks' time. I was eager to meet her new sibling, but was eager to meet her new sibling. To hear that her mother had been forced to join the defenders on the wall severely ticked her off. I'll take her place. I got a few ammo types that I think might be able to get through plate mail. At the very least, I should be able to take out the brains. They should have a harder time their brains, slowing them down, at the very least. Heck, maybe with a bullet inside their heads, they'll have a harder time healing as well. it's worth a shot. It's worth a shot. Not like we got any better plans at the moment. Gage sighed as Nada was about to dart off, only for the resounding crack. The wall next to the gate gave way. The close quarters fighters, the melee or close quarters fighters that had been held in reserve till now, all darted forth without needing to be told what to do. Considered following Marianne up onto the wall for half a heartbeat before she darted after. Charles. Her shotgun appearing in her hand. As it did, 2 points vanished into the ether. As both the reload skill activated and the current clip was replaced. Drum magazine. With the HE penetrator rounds. She'd regret that a few minutes later. something she'd regret the moment she turned the next corner and found a dozen or so goblins trying to break into someone's house. Well, it was likely empty, as most of the non-combatants would have been evacuated to the church's cellar next to the main village center as soon as this whole mess had started. She didn't want to risk it. Five ether points vanished. Mana points vanished into the ether as her armor and appeared on her body. She raised her shield and charged, arrows plunking off of it as she got close. The first goblin found itself skewered on the tip of her bayonet before it was thrown aside. It wasn't dead, but it would at least be slowed down enough that she wouldn't have to worry about it for now. The next found its head sliced clean off by the blade of her axe. By the axe blade attached to her bayonet. The third charged with its own axe and tried to get a swing at her, only to lose its own head when the blunt end of her shield pinned it between it and the house's wall. Have its windpipe crushed. The last two were met by a faint clicking in the back of her throat before a small jet of fire enveloped them. She walked over to the first goblin she had stabbed and used the bayonet to put it out of its misery before turning back towards the breach in the village walls and continuing onward. The next pack was too big for her to fight off directly. Nearly 15 goblins, but nothing a quick hand grenade couldn't finish off. Grenade couldn't deal with, and those few that survived quickly met their end at the blade of her bayonet. This continued for another 30 another handful of streets. Until, just as she was about to turn around to slice another goblin, a third emerged from her shadow. A goblin assassin. Of course they'd be evolved. She was about to try and whack it with her tail when an arrow found itself buried in the side of the goblin's head. She turned to see who had provided her support, only to find Marianne nodding at her from a rooftop. A rooftop next to the walls. Had she really managed to get that close without noticing? Most of the archers had likely retreated back to the second wall. And final wall. After the first one fell. A few of the mages likely would have joined the fray, but with the close combatants, but would have been close to the wall as well, wanting to reserve their strength for the bigger threats to come. And speaking of the bigger threats, Everest. The town's only blood rage berserker found himself smashing through three buildings next to where Nyla was standing. As he came to rest in the fourth, as it just before it collapsed on top of him, Nyla, eyes locked with what had smashed him through the wall. Sent the man flying. A troll. It was missing an arm, but that was currently growing back. And judging by the lack of armor on most of its other limbs, it wasn't the first it had lost in this fight alone. Nyla quickly swore she brought her shotgun to bear. She expected it to do something. What she didn't expect was a bang nearly twice as loud as what she was used to, followed by a second pop as the breastplate as a fist-sized hole erupted from the breastplate of the troll. Into the breastplate of the troll, causing it to stumble back before it glared at her in a fit of rage. She should have been terrified. She should have been panicking. Instead, as soon as the reload skill ratcheted another round into the chamber, she fired again, and a second hole punctured through right next to the first, followed by a third, then a fourth, and the troll spat blood. She hadn't hit the heart, but she had done some damage. It was charging. She dropped her shield so she could steady her shotgun. Better. These things have one heck of a recoil. The fifth found home, and the troll dropped like a sack of bricks to the ground, glaring up at her feebly before she planted it the barrel of her gun right in the eye slits of its armor and fired. Without the metal helmet, with the metal helmet containing the explosion, the skull and most of the head was reduced to red paste. Gasped as she finally remembered to breathe. That was terrifying. That behemoth was nearly 6 times her size, and likely could have sent her flying with a single swing of its mace. Mace. At least she finally knew what these new bullets did. And she had to admit, yeah, they were more than worth the price. Just as Marianne managed to climb down and check on her, Everest erupted from the remains of the house. Bloodied, battered, a crazed look in his eye. For half a second before he recognized the two girls. Holy shit, Nyla, you actually managed to put that bastard down. I've been fighting him since before they broke through the walls, but I couldn't do enough damage. Before she could reply, she stumbled forward, feeling a rush as she shot up. She nearly shot up 10 levels.
she'd love to see what she got, but now wasn't the time. Yeah, expensive rounds. 10 of the bugger. A box of 10 of them. Cost my entire mana pool. I only got 55 left. Nyla said, shaking her head, trying to focus at the task at hand. For those of you who are joining in, this is my Storia class tanker. If you have any questions or want to make any suggestions, please feel free. This is a rough draft, right? This is not going to receive any editing as I go. If you hear any snoring in the background, that's my dog. And thank you for watching, I guess. Damn it. No way you can take them all out with that amount if you took your 5 rounds. I'm guessing you can't take them all out with that many, can you? Sorry, it took me nearly 5 of them. I'm sorry, but no, it took me nearly 5 of them just to take that one out. I'll run out of bullets before they run out of bodies. Plus, I can't quick swap magazines, so I can't use my gun against the goblins. If you can act as our front line, we could probably take a handful of them out, though. As if on cue. On cue, the very moment she said that, 3 more of the trolls stumbled over the rubble of a nearby building. Through a nearby building. Spotting the small group. Marianne quickly set to work picking off the goblins that followed them. On cue, Everest groaned before charging the 3. The blood from the first dead ogre turning into red mist to heal his wounds as he charged past. Meanwhile, Nalia brought her shotgun to bear on the first of the 3. Her shield vanishing along with 2 ether points as a grenade appeared in her hand. She quickly used her teeth to pull the pin, and by the time she was unloading a 3rd round into the first ogre, she released the trigger and chucked the grenade. And after blowing and chucked it before dumping a 3rd round into the thing's chest. It bounced off of the troll's helmet before detonating. She wasn't sure if it was dead, but the helmet was at least mangled, so she doubted it could heal easily. It was down, but she doubted it was out. She brought the gun to bear on the 2nd. Though had to use her next grenade to blow apart a group of goblins that were getting too close. Marianne was doing her best, but she could only fire arrows as fast as she could draw them. Arrows, bullets, grenades, and the roar of a bloody berserker.
pushed back against the oncoming tide. They had managed to kill and by the time she emptied half her magazine, they had managed to kill another. And was about to take on down the last one, only for Marianne to scream. The first troll turned to look at what she was yelling about, only to see the mace of the first troll, the one she had downed but not killed, mere inches from her. She tried to summon her shield, but she couldn't plant it in time. The plate of metal crumpling against her arm before it pinned it against her chest. She felt the metal plates and ceramic of her armor shatter or bend. She felt her bones snap and something sharp press into her lung. Before a brief moment of weightlessness, followed by the crash and intense pain of smashing through several buildings. Numb impacts as she smashed through several buildings. And that should be it for tonight. I'll get to work editing this over the next few days, and it should be posted soon enough on my Patreon. In a few weeks, it'll be posted on Royal Road if you're interested. And with that, same name as what I got here. And with that said, this is Wrecker, signing off.